Banglesdorf, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Insider's Guides. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing Dominic Rivers. Dominic flies a Global 6000, but today we're going to talk about the 6000, specifically the XRS and the 5000, so we get a good benchmark for the variance on each one of those planes. Dominic, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you.
Well, let's jump right in and talk about the Global XRS. I know you've been flying the Global line of aircraft for a while. Can you tell a little bit about how long you've been flying those and what got you to that point?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I was actually very lucky to get the job. I was teaching people to fly light aircraft in Biggin Hill back in 2008. And I was, a very long story, I got the type rating. The job then fell through, but the CAE offered me a job assisting the instructors. And a year later, I actually got a job on a Global in Hong Kong. I was flying a 5000, but I was also working on some XRSs. And then 6 years later, I got a job in Tokyo, and I've been working in Tokyo on a 6000.
Well, that's not the usual path of people. They don't usually start flying a jet like a Global XRS. And wow, are you so lucky or so blessed. And I want to get more into your story about how you first got into aviation a little bit later on, but I would love to give our listeners an overview of what you think the capabilities are of the Global XRS. What are its sweet spots?
The sweet spots are very large cabin and very, very good range and performance. That cabin, obviously, it's nice to be able to have plenty of space to stretch out in. And the XRS has a crew rest area. As I say, I also flew the 5000, and the 5000 is a slightly shorter aircraft. By shortening the aircraft, you reduce the galley size, and you get rid of the crew rest area, which makes having a third pilot for the longer flights a bit more difficult, because they then have to rest in the cabin. So with the XRS, you've got that crew rest area. So you've got plenty of room for the passengers, plenty of room for the crew, incredible performance. So you can get in and out of some very, very short runways. So you've got more options as to where you're going to go. So you can land closer to your ultimate destination. And you can also outclimb the mountains better. So it's one thing being able to land in an airport, but if there's lots of mountains around the airport, climbing out of the airport, that is always the gotcha. Some people have been known to fly into airports. Yeah, we're good. And then when they come to do the performance calculations to get out of the airport, not so good.
Yeah, then you have to choose between kicking passengers and luggage off or taking fuel off the airplane to climb out.
Precisely, yes. So all of the Global aircraft have incredible performance. Yeah, similar kind of capabilities. All of the Globals, the G650 and the G550, they're all kind of the same position with the performance. The Globals and the 650 have the larger cabin than the 550. So, but the 550 has better avionics than the XRS, but not as good as the 6000.
Fantastic.
So too many airplanes juggling around in your head right now.
Right? That's why we do these, so people can learn about specific models and get some questions answered. You touched on crew rest, and I want to talk a little bit about the galley. And when you fly with a flight attendant, what the flight attendant says about the accommodations in the galley for being able to serve the passengers well.
Okay. So flight attendants will always want a bigger galley. No galley is big enough for the flight attendant. That said, there is there's actually slightly more space in the 5,000 galley than in the XRS or the 6,000. The 6,000 is the same as the XRS, but it's got the newer avionics. Because by getting the 5,000, it's a shorter aircraft, you don't have a crew rest area. They can then hand that space over to galley area. So galley actually has bigger work surfaces, but it's got a shorter work surface, but it's got two of them instead of just the one on one side. So the flight attendant is actually a bit happier in the 5,000 than the XRS or the 6,000.
Thank you for explaining that. That really helps clarify what that looks like for a flight attendant to be able to serve on the flight. You mentioned that there's a difference in the avionics. What's the avionics suite look like in an XRS compared to a Global 6000?
Right. So the XRS is the original Global, and it has 6 main screens. It's made by a company called Honeywell, and it was state of the art. But time moves on. I don't know how many. I think they first started working on it like 15 or 20 years ago is when they first started working on it. So it's, by present day standards, it's old, but compared to a lot of airlines, it's still pretty new. Within business aviation, we have the latest and greatest toys. We're the guinea pigs for all the new toys, basically, because particularly under Part 91, that's the American designator for private flying, the rules are a lot less stringent. So we can be the crash test dummies, but that means that we get more toys. So the 6,000 has significantly better avionics, which makes it safer, but this is a relative term, than the XRS, because I should clarify. The 5,000, there's the 5,000 and the 6,000. The 5,000 can have the Honeywell avionics, the old avionics, but it can also have the new Collins avionics. Depends on which one you have it. So to be clearer, we should really refer to the two as Honeywell avionics systems or Collins avionics. The Honeywell's the old one. Now the airlines are coming up to Collins level of avionics, but the majority of the airlines are still at the Honeywell level. So it's moderately safer to have the Collins avionics than the Honeywell system, but as I say, it's a relative term. The Honeywell one is still very, very good.
Why do you say it's safer? How do you qualify that?
There's so much more information. So I think they're either 15 or 17 inch screens. So you've got a screen in front of you that's this big, with a map, with a really good weather radar, with loads and loads of information on it. So your situational awareness is phenomenal, assuming you're up to it. Some people aren't up to it. So some people it's an overload. Whereas the Honeywell system, it's a lot more, not black and white, it's like 4 colors. The screen can display more than 4 colors, but it's a lot more simple. It's a lot more concise. And in some ways I prefer it because you're only given the information that you need. And to do what you want to do is like 1 or 2 button presses. With the Collins system, there's so many things that you can do. It's so complicated. If you know what you're doing, it's brilliant. But there's about 3 ways of doing everything. So somebody asks you, can you just extend the sensor line off that runway? Oh, how do I do that? I can do it this way, or this way, or this way. Or maybe I should do it this way. Oh, and then that ends up taking too much time. So it can be very, very good, but only once you're up to speed on it. And I think it's easier to get up to speed on the Honeywell system.
The more traditional, it sounds like the Honeywell's the more.
Otherwise, you're overloaded with information, and until you're familiar with it, good with it, you can be overloaded with the information.
Well, I'd love to talk a little bit about reliability. So dispatch reliability and other things to do with the reliability of the maintenance schedule and things like that. What do you have to say about the XRS from that front?
The aircraft that I used to fly, which was a Honeywell-based 5000, that was a bus. It was banging around Southeast Asia all of the time, very unloved, went to the cheapest maintenance they could find. It was never hangared, and like northern China, it can be -30. And then you go down to Singapore and it's +30. And these variations in temperature, it wears things out. That aircraft, towards the end of the time that I was flying it, it would go AOG. I wouldn't want to put a figure on it, but a lot more than my current aircraft. My current aircraft I've been flying for 3 years and has never gone AOG. So that is partly down to the way that the type of the operation, where it was being stored, and the type of maintenance that it was getting, and it partly down to the age of the aircraft. I think that if you take care of them, they can be pretty reliable, but if you don't, then they're not.
Amazing how that works.
It is. You can pay me now or you can pay me later.
Good philosophy. Let's pay now and keep them all flying in the air and flying well. It's much safer.
Yes.
Talk to me about the fuel burn and the climb and the experience you have for going on long legs.
I was just looking back in my logbook, and I found my longest flight in the past couple of years was from Istanbul back to Tokyo, and that took just over 12 hours airborne. And I can't remember how much fuel we landed with, but I have never landed with sufficiently empty tanks to get nervous. So I would say that was at the edge of my comfort zone, was that kind of range. As for climb performance, that varies, of course, with the amount of fuel that you have on board. So with the XRS, you can take 45,000 pounds of fuel, whereas with the actual aircraft, based on operating weight, is about 51,000. So by filling it up with fuel, you're almost doubling the weight. So the performance changes significantly. With low fuel, it's a rocket ship. It's a fun rocket ship.
Basic science. Science. Can you tell me anything idiosyncrasy-wise when you're talking with other pilots about the global series of aircraft that you hear that are unique or great about this aircraft, how they perform compared to other large jets?
Performance-wise, I think the majority of the aircraft in this category, they pretty much all have outstanding performance. They've got amazing wings. They've got, most of them have variations on the same engine, the 550 and the Global XRS and 5000. They all basically have the same engine. So they've all got very, very similar performance from the engine, and they all have very, very large wings. So you're going to take off from very, very short runways and amazing brakes. You're gonna stop very quickly. It's very good fun when you want to do that. And it catches air traffic control out sometimes, because you land and you taxi off on a taxiway that they didn't expect you to taxi off, and they're like, which is quite fun.
That is fun. Can you talk to me a little bit about the luggage capacity of the aircraft, kind of moving from you having fun to the passengers having fun and being able to bring all their stuff?
Well, the bigger the hold, the passengers will always want to put more stuff in the hold. That said, it has a very capacious baggage bay. It's rare that we run out of space. You do become a very good Tetris expert, but if you're careful about how you load it, there's actually quite a lot of space.
And what's the loading experience for you? Are you handing baggage up? Is there a ladder, someone in there?
So there'll be a crew member that goes down into the hold, and the door, I think the top of the door is probably about maybe a meter up, a meter above the base of above the floor. So the ground handlers will have to lift the baggage to a little bit overhead height, maybe 6.5 feet, something like that. And then the door is maybe 80 centimeters, 90 centimeters tall, something like that. So you can get some fairly large things in, as long as you have a strategy for packing it, you can get quite a lot of stuff in.
And people that can lift them overhead.
Yes.
What about the rest of the passenger experience? What do the passengers say about the flight, the quietness, the steadiness of the airplane while it's flying, and the amenities in the cabin?
The cabin is a very good size. One thing that the passengers appreciate is having a forward and an aft cabin. So the aft cabin has a double bed in it, and there's a door to close it. So if the passengers need some privacy, they can close that door. There's also, depending on the configuration, you can have, generally there's 2 more single beds in the front cabin, and the club seating becomes another double bed. So there's quite a lot of space for people on long flights to stretch out. There is an option for a humidifier. I don't believe that it actually makes a significant difference to the amount of humidity in the air. Somebody told me that it would be really nice to have some sort of humidification system, because the air up there. So we had just an ordinary thermometer that measures the humidity, and it would go down to, I think, about 18%. That was as low as it would read. Below that, it wouldn't read, and this thing just never read anything. Even when we didn't have that humidifier. We had just commercially available plug into the wall type humidifiers, and there was these people, when they were doing the test, I don't think it was even my company, somebody did a test, and basically it didn't humidify the air at all. But it sounds like a really nice idea. What else about the cabin? The cabin entertainment system is pretty good, generally, depending on the completion that you get. So you've got 2 screens, but you've also got screens that clip into the side, so you've got a screen right in front of you. So the audio is pretty good, for if you have passengers that like karaoke.
Of course you do. You fly in Asia.
Yes, one of my first flights. So I'd not flown the aircraft much, but I'd done a lot in the sim. The passengers are watching some action movie, We start the takeoff roll, we rotate the head, boom! I think it's an engine blowing up or something. No, it was the action movie in the back.
Glad you got past that and it wasn't a boom engine blowing, it was the action movie. Fantastic. Switch gears a little bit and talk about how high you've gone and how fast you've gone in the Global.
Okay. It's always a pissing contest, isn't it? Are we allowed to say that?
Of course. You're a pilot. You can say whatever you want.
So I believe that for certification reasons, none of these aircraft ever even tried to go above 51,000 feet. And they're all certified to 51,000, flight level 510 and no higher. Really, there's no point in going any higher anyway. The airlines, most of them are in the mid-30s. Some of them make it up to 41. Above there, there's nobody there. Now, the benefits of going higher is you burn a lot less fuel. You're generally above the weather, so you're going to have a smoother ride. And you're also away from all of the other traffic, so you can get direct routing, so you can get places fast. But yeah, we generally start at, say, 41,000 feet, and we may go up as high as 47. I've been to 51 because it's fun. There's actually no point in doing so, because you've got to be so light on fuel that you get up there and you spend about 20 minutes, half an hour up there, and it's time to come back down anyway. So you've not actually gained anything from it, but it's good to be able to say you've done it. As for the speed, most people will cruise around at Mach 8.5. If you want to save some fuel, then you go back to 83. The limit is Mach 8.9. So these are all hard figures, and there's no ooh, you did Mach 8.9. It's just that's the limit. They go. That said, if you have tailwind, then you can go fast. Sometimes you can have a tailwind like 200 knot tailwind. So I've done 693 knots over the ground, which is well over Mach 1. My friend has done 721. So that's when you have it.
Very fun. What have I forgotten to ask you about the Global that you think is really interesting?
The one bit of advice that I would give to any crew that get onto it is to start it up slowly. There's a lot of different systems, all of which have to go through their checks. So when you switch it on, like when you switch your computer on or your phone on, and it starts checking through all sorts of things, the system can appear to have started up, but that's only the system that's showing you, the display system. There's 10 other systems at the back, and so you start telling it to do stuff, and it goes to one of the systems that has not booted up. That one doesn't give the right answer, and it all falls over. So you've got to start it up slowly, and you get a lot of problems with people not starting them up slowly.
So taking your time, how long, if you're doing it correctly, would it take to get the aircraft ready to take off?
Oh, I've got ready for a transatlantic flight in half an hour. You can do it very quickly, but if you rush the first few steps, so if you're sensible about the way that you do things, what I will tend to do is I'll switch the battery master on, and then I'll go off and do something else, and then I'll go through a couple of the checks, and then I'll switch the APU on, and then I'll go and do something else. What people tend to do is they switch the battery master on, and then they wait, I don't know, 30 seconds or so, and it seems to have been, it's the APU is the more critical part. They switch the APU on, and they see everything come up, and then they start checking everything else, and particularly the hydraulic system that uses a very large amount of power. So if you start switching hydraulics on and off, you have to test each one, whilst in particular the cabin system. The cabin system is very picky about its power. So if the cabin is booting up whilst you're flicking these hydraulic switches, you get spikes through the system, and things stop working.
Wise. That's a great thing to know for certain. Well, Dominic, thank you so much for all of this information about the Global 6000. Y'all are not going to want to miss hearing how he got his start and how he ended up starting out flying the Global.